All right, so today we are diving into a Senate hearing on immigration
Okay.
that got a little heated, to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
We've got transcripts from a pretty intense exchange between Senator John Kennedy and some witnesses who were advocating for, more open border policies.
Right.
And it was a wild ride, let me tell you.
I bet.
This hearing was supposed to be about using the military for immigration enforcement,
Uh-huh.
but Senator Kennedy seemed to use it as a platform to really challenge the witnesses on their stance on immigration overall.
Interesting.
Yeah, he dug into illegal immigration deportations, the impact on American workers, all sorts of things.
That sounds like he had a whole agenda.
He did. He really did.
So how did you kick things off?
Well, right out of the gate, he called the southern border an open bleeding wound and chaotic by design.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he went on to say that anyone waiting in line to immigrate legally is treated like a chump under the current administration's policies.
That's pretty harsh language.
It is. It's definitely designed to get a reaction.
Yeah. I mean, it does paint a very stark and dramatic picture.
For sure.
And it seems like he was trying to tap into a sense of frustration among certain voters who feel like the system is rigged against them.
Absolutely. And he wasn't afraid to keep pushing the envelope.
Right.
Well, he even accused the witnesses of supporting open borders, despite the fact that they kept saying they believed in the rule of law.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Because it shows how differently each side can interpret that concept.
Yeah. I mean, what does rule of law even mean in the context of immigration?
Exactly.
It's one of those phrases that can become a real battleground in a politically charged debate.
For sure. And it's a good reminder that words can have a lot of different meanings depending on who's using them.
Absolutely.
And speaking of things getting heated, things took an even sharper turn when Senator Kennedy brought up a witness who had previously criticized former President Trump.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he was identified as a general in the transcript, and Kennedy seemed determined to press him on those past comments, even though the general was trying to steer the conversation back to the issue of using the military for immigration enforcement.
That raises a good question, though.
What's that?
Is it really appropriate to bring up someone's past political stances in a hearing like this?
It's a tough one.
I mean, on one hand, those statements could be relevant to the witness's credibility or biases,
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it can feel like a personal attack, especially if it distracts from the issue at hand.
Right, so where do you draw the line?
It's a blurry line for sure.
It is, and then on top of all that, there was this whole thing about a tweet from one of the witnesses claiming that Texas and Louisiana have their knives out for black immigrants.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, and Kennedy really pushed for specifics, but the witness struggled to recall the context or provide any concrete examples to back up the claim.
Huh. It sounds like a classic example of how social media can escalate these kinds of debates. Someone makes a short, attention-grabbing statement online, but then when they're challenged to provide evidence, things get a little murky.
It happens all the time.
It does, and you could practically feel the tension in the room as Kennedy kept pressing the witness.
Oh, yeah.
It seemed like he was trying to figure out if this tweet was a genuine concern or just meant to be inflammatory.
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but it definitely added to the drama.
No doubt. And it's interesting.
Right.
This whole exchange about the tweet actually leads us right into the heart of the disagreement, the economic impact of immigration.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like this perfect little microcosm of the larger debate.
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Buckle up, folks, because we're about to go deep on the economics of immigration.
Can't wait. So Senator Kennedy really hammered home this idea that illegal immigration suppresses wages for American workers,
Yeah.
especially in industries like construction, agriculture, and hospitality, the usual suspects. And he even brought up a study that one of the witnesses had co-authored.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this study highlighted the potential economic losses from mass deportations.
Huh. So it sounds like he was trying to use their own research against them.
Exactly like saying, see, even you admit that there are downsides to having a large undocumented workforce.
Okay, but I'm a little confused here.
What's that?
If mass deportations would lead to economic losses, wouldn't that mean that those undocumented workers are actually filling a necessary role in the economy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it really exposes the complexity of this issue.
Right, because on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward.
It does, but it's not that simple.
So what's the catch?
Well, the study predicted significant economic losses from mass deportations,
Uh,
especially in industries that rely heavily on immigrant labor.
okay.
But it didn't explicitly say that those losses would translate into higher wages for American workers.
So it's not a direct one-to-one
I
correlation.
know it's much more nuanced than that.
So we can't just assume that if we deport undocumented workers, then American workers will automatically get those jobs and higher wages.
Exactly. There are a lot of other factors to consider.
Like what?
Well, for one, are American workers even willing or available to fill those specific roles?
That's a good point.
And are employers prepared to offer higher wages and better working conditions to attract them?
Right. Because if they're not, then those jobs might just stay empty.
Precisely, and that would hurt the economy even more.
This whole wage debate is fascinating
It is, isn't it?
because Senator Kennedy seemed so convinced that illegal immigration was driving down wages for American workers.
Yeah, he kept coming back to that point.
But is there any actual evidence to support that claim?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
How so?
Some studies do suggest that a large influx of low-skilled immigrants can lead to lower wages for native-born workers.
Especially those who are also low-skilled.
Right. The idea is that a bigger pool of workers competing for the same jobs gives employers more power to keep wages down.
Yeah, that makes sense. Basic supply and demand.
Exactly.
But didn't you say that some studies have found a positive impact on wages in the long run?
That's right.
So which is it?
Well, it really depends on a lot of factors.
Like what kind of factors?
The specific skills and education levels of the immigrants, the industries they're working in, the overall health of the economy.
So it's not as simple as Senator Kennedy was making it sound.
Not at all. And it gets even more complicated when you factor in this whole idea that undocumented immigrants are stealing jobs from American workers.
Oh, yeah. That's another one of those phrases that gets thrown around a lot.
It is, and it's often used to stir up fear and resentment.
Right. It plays into this narrative that hardworking Americans are being pushed aside.
Exactly, and that's a powerful narrative, especially for people who are struggling to make ends meet.
But is it accurate?
Well, again, it's not so black and white.
Meaning?
While there might be some cases where undocumented immigrants are directly competing with American workers for the same jobs, there's also evidence that they often fill roles that American workers are unwilling or unable to fill.
Like in agriculture and hospitality.
Exactly. Those jobs are often physically demanding, sometimes dangerous, with long hours and unpredictable schedules.
So instead of stealing jobs, they might actually be filling a critical gap in the labor market.
Precisely. And their presence might even be keeping certain industries afloat.
Wow. It's amazing how complex this issue is.
It really is, and it's a good reminder that there's often more to the story than what we see on the surface.
Absolutely. We can't just rely on sound bites and slogans to understand these complex issues.
We need to dig deeper and consider all sides of the story.
Well said. And speaking of complex issues, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. The whole debate about a path to citizenship.
Oh yeah, that's where things got really interesting.
It did, didn't it?
It's like the ultimate clash of ideologies.
And it's a debate that's not going away anytime soon.
Not a chance.
Okay, so let's talk about this path to citizenship.
Yeah.
Senator Kennedy seemed totally against it. He kept calling it amnesty.
Yeah, that's a loaded word for sure.
Like he was saying it's rewarding people for breaking the law.
Right, and it plays into this idea that people are cutting in line,
Yeah, and undermining the efforts of those who immigrated legally.
Exactly. It triggers a really strong reaction from people like Senator Kennedy.
And he was especially worried about it flooding the labor market,
Right.
harming American workers.
Yeah, he kept using that economic argument.
It's like he was saying we have to choose between helping undocumented immigrants or protecting American workers.
Right.
But the witnesses pushed back on that pretty hard,
They did.
saying that undocumented immigrants are already working here, contributing to the economy, and that a path to citizenship would actually level the playing field,
Yeah, bring him out of the shadows.
make it all above board.
It's a fairness argument, but also an economic one.
Right, because they're saying it would benefit the country as a whole.
Exactly. Bring millions of people into the formal economy, boost tax revenue, consumer spending, all of that.
So it's less about rewarding lawbreakers and more about finding a practical solution.
Yeah, a pragmatic approach.
But it still raises a lot of questions.
It does.
Like, how do you design a path to citizenship that's fair?
Right, and doesn't encourage more illegal immigration.
How do you address the concerns of people who feel like the system is being abused?
Tough questions.
Really tough.
And there are no easy answers.
It's all a balancing act.
It is.
Weighing principles against practicalities.
Trying to find a workable solution.
This whole deep dive has been a balancing act.
I kinda did.
We've gone from Senator Kennedy's fiery rhetoric to a more nuanced understanding of the economic complexities.
And the arguments for a path to citizenship.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But that's kind of the point, isn't it?
I think so.
To move beyond the sound bites and the emotional arguments.
Yeah, engage with the complexity.
Because there are valid concerns on all sides.
Absolutely.
And finding solutions requires, a willingness to listen, to learn, to consider different perspectives.
Well said.
I think we've all learned a lot today.
Me too.
And hopefully our listeners have as well.
I hope so.
This deep dive has been quite a journey.
It has.
A journey into the heart of a really heated debate.
Yeah.
And it's left me with a lot to think about.
Me too. And I think that's a good thing.
It is.
To spark curiosity, encourage critical thinking.
Remind everyone that even the most contentious issues deserve our thoughtful consideration.
Absolutely.
So to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
stay curious, keep questioning, and don't be afraid to dive deep into the issues that matter most.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us.